With Plan B emergency contraception, we're in control of our future. It's backup birth control you take after unprotected sex that helps prevent pregnancy before it starts. It works by temporarily delaying ovulation, and it won't impact your future fertility. Plan B is available in all 50 U.S. states at all major retailers near you, with no ID, prescription, or age requirement needed. Together, we've got this. Follow Plan B on Insta at Plan B One Step to learn more. Use as directed.
This week I'm talking about supporting others. In this episode, I'll cover what healthy support for others looks like, why being mindful about how you support others matters, and how to support other people in a healthy way. So, let's talk. This is Let's Talk About Mental Health, a weekly podcast full of simple ideas for better mental health. I'm your host, Jeremy Godwin, and I'm an Australian writer and speaker who spent most of the 2010s dealing with severe depression and anxiety, and that led me to change careers to study mental health. In this show, I use my knowledge of psychology, sociology, and counselling, combined with my personal experiences of dealing with mental illness, to bring you a show full of ways to improve your mental well-being, one step at a time. Each week, I look at one specific topic and go through simple things you can do to improve your mental health. So, get comfortable and let's talk about mental health. Because the more we talk about it, the easier it gets. Hello and welcome to episode 79, and thanks so much for joining me. This week is all about supporting others. We all have people in our lives who we may find ourselves providing support to from time to time in one form or another, and often it's a fundamental part of our close relationships. But as with all things, providing support in a healthy way requires balance. I talk a lot about doing no harm, being kind, and giving more than you take, and part of that involves ensuring that you're not giving so much that the relationship becomes one-sided, because that is when you wind up doing harm to yourself. It's a fine line, and it becomes even more complicated when you yourself are dealing with challenges like anxiety or depression, because that is when you need to be extra careful to ensure that you're taking care of yourself. So there are lots of different things to consider about supporting others in a healthy way, and I'll be exploring that this week. First, 2 quick updates. I have new episodes out now on my 2 YouTube channels. On Let's Talk About Mental Health TV, I'm looking at habits to stop now if you want better mental health. And on No Nonsense Advice for Living, I'm looking at why you are totally responsible for what happens in your life and not anybody else, and why that's a good thing. You can find them both on YouTube or head to letstalkaboutmentalhealth.com.au and watch them now. You'll also find the links in the episode description on whatever podcast service you're currently listening to me on. The other update is that I now have just 2 coaching slots left if you're interested in working together one-on-one. My approach is a combination of counselling and coaching, and so if you're interested in having a regular session with me that's like one of these podcasts but tailored to your specific circumstances, then head over to letstalkaboutmentalhealth.com.au/coaching for information and to register your interest. I'll shortly be closing this off for a few months, so if you're interested, get in now as I only work with a handful of clients at a time. So with all of that covered, on with this week's episode about supporting others. In 1987, an American band called Club Nouveau released a cover version of Lean On Me, a song made famous back in the 1970s by its original writer Bill Withers. Now, I'm sharing the 80s version here primarily because I love an upbeat 1980s bop, but regardless of which version you like, this song is all about supporting others, especially in the chorus, which I'm going to quote now. Do not worry, I'm not going to sing at you. The quote is, "Lean on me when you're not strong, and I'll be your friend. I'll help you carry on, for it won't be long till I'm gonna need somebody to lean on." Many of our closest relationships involve supporting one another and a healthy dose of give and take, which is a concept that I talk about a lot, along with doing no harm and being kind. While giving more than you take is definitely kindness in action, giving too much is potentially harmful because it can take too much away from you as well as taking away the other person's responsibility for themselves. As you can probably already tell, what I'm talking about here is a tricky balancing act where we need to know what the line is between giving enough of the right type of support versus anything else that might be unhealthy, either for you or for the other person, or both. So let's talk about what is healthy support for others. And while the term support generally refers to giving assistance and helping people, which sounds great, we also need to consider that the word support in many contexts refers to something that holds up a structure. And the challenge when we are supporting another person is to ensure that we're not the ones that are having to do all of the heavy lifting and do all of the holding up of that other person. Which is a roundabout way of saying that when we support someone else, the last thing that we want or need to have happen is that somehow the responsibility for fixing all of their problems lands on us. Because there's a very big difference between being codependent versus being independent. Healthy support is about providing understanding and empathy rather than taking on another person's challenges and difficulties as if they were your own. Part of that is about setting the other person up for long-term success, because if you try to solve their problems for them, then they will likely never learn how to be strong and independent on their own. It's a challenge that I'm sure many of us have faced in our relationships. Parents, I'm sure that you have faced it if and when your children have run into difficulties in life. So then the other part of this here is about ensuring that you have healthy boundaries and that you are not being taken advantage of. I've said time and time again in this show that I am a realistic optimist, and I dedicated episode 47 to talking about optimism. And the piece there is about believing that most people do have good intentions in life. However, not everybody does. So it's essential to have boundaries and to be assertive. Topics that I discussed in episode 53 and episode 45 respectively. So that's a little bit about what support is, which leads me to the next part of this episode, which is, why does having a mindful approach to supporting others matter? And I think it's fair to say that most of us want to be supportive for those that we're closest to in our lives. Your partner, your kids if you have them, your family, your close friends, and even potentially some of your co-workers or neighbours or other people who you're closely connected to. But the fact is that you only have so much emotional energy available to you at any given time. And this can be affected by what's going on in your own life. And so if you give too much, then you may find yourself depleting your reserves, which may then lead to issues for you later on. Everything in life is about balance. Give too little, and people might consider you to be uncaring. Give too much, and people may see you as being someone to fix all of their problems. I go through this when I'm working with clients in my coaching work because I combine counseling in with my coaching. And so when I'm working with clients, I have to ensure that I'm maintaining a professional line where my role is to provide guidance rather than spell out all of the answers for them. Because what might work for me may not necessarily work for you, since we're all unique. So when I talk about mindful support, what I mean is about being aware of this constant balancing act of giving without giving too much or too little, and ensuring that you set and maintain very clear boundaries, and shortly I'll talk through how to do that. Supporting other people is something that can happen in many different ways: physically, mentally, spiritually, socially, emotionally, and financially. And each comes with its own set of challenges that you need to navigate. For example, if you're supporting someone financially, where is the line drawn before support becomes dependence? Or in terms of emotional support, what is the line between being there for someone versus taking on all of their emotional baggage and being the person that they turn to fight their battles for them or to resolve their issues for them? How do we know the difference between supporting and enabling, especially when we're talking about enabling in terms of unhealthy habits like addictions or unsafe behaviors? It's a really broad conversation, and every single situation and relationship is completely different. But it's something that I want you to be very thoughtful about as we consider this conversation about supporting others. If the support you're providing is unhealthy, it's going to cause issues for you and for the other person in the long term. These are challenges that many of us have to deal with in our lives, and of course it becomes even more complex when you yourself have challenges with your mental health, such as anxiety or depression. When we're dealing with our own issues, we might find ourselves struggling to maintain our boundaries, or we may lack the emotional energy to be there for someone else. If that's the case, it's okay. I know we probably want to always be there for the people that we care most about, but sometimes you just cannot. Or maybe you can a little, but not as much as what is being asked of you. This stuff is hard, and saying no is rarely easy when it comes to someone that we love asking us for assistance. But the fact of the matter is that you can only give what you can give. And if your tank is low, then you need to be very mindful about what you give. I know this is a cliche, but it's like on the plane when they tell you that if there's an emergency, you need to put your own oxygen mask on first before you can go and help others. Do you know why they say that? Because there's no point trying to help others if you can't breathe, because you will pass out. Hey, you might be strong, but nobody is so strong that they can survive without oxygen for too long. So how do you do all of that? How do you support other people in a healthy and balanced way? Well, let's get into the how-to part of this week's episode. Okay, so I'm going to begin with some general guidelines to consider about supporting others, no matter who they are, and then I'll look at some specific actions that you can take that are supportive in a healthy way. So the first general guideline to keep in mind is that healthy support is about give and take. And what I mean by that is that a healthy relationship is a two-way street. So there's an expectation that you receive kindness and support back. Now, I'm not saying that it's a tit for tat, as in, well, I'll only support you if you support me, because, well, that's just childish. But love and kindness has to be reciprocal in general. If you're friends with someone and you're constantly giving, but not getting anything in return, something has to change. I've said in previous episodes that I have walked away from friendships because 95% of the time it's me who is the one to reach out and check in first. And I've had situations where when we do see each other, that person just talks about themselves the entire time. I walked away from a catch-up with someone a little while ago and I got in my car and then I realized that they hadn't even asked me how I was at the start of the conversation, let alone taken any interest in my life whatsoever. So that's my point. If you find yourself being treated as some sort of support dispensing machine, then you need to stop and think about what's going on. Because if you let that continue, then you're doing harm to yourself. Using another example, I had someone in my life who only ever contacted me when they wanted money. And it got to the point where I honestly just felt like an ATM and I just had to make it stop. Do not let yourself be treated like shit. Which leads me to my next point. Set and maintain clear boundaries. And this really is a continuation of not allowing yourself to be taken advantage of. Healthy boundaries in terms of supporting others are essential because it's about deciding on what you are willing to support versus what is not appropriate, and then sticking to those boundaries. And as I mentioned earlier, I talked about boundaries at length back in episode 53, so check that out. Now, can I just say here that boundaries are not about putting conditions on your love, because that is unkind, but instead it's about being clear on what you will or won't accept in terms of doing no harm, being kind, and giving more than you take. My next point is, if someone takes from you repeatedly or begs for support, especially early into a relationship or friendship, then your alarm bells should be going off. Pay attention to them. Have you ever had a situation where you know someone is trouble, but you ignore your gut and go along with things, even when alarm bells are going off repeatedly in your mind? Do not ever ignore those alarm bells. Heed them. If need be, put some distance between you and the other person for a little while. The last thing that you want or need is to be dragged into another person's drama. Drama is the opposite of good mental health, so avoid it like the plague. My next point is, remember, you are not responsible for what another human being does or does not do. Your partner, your siblings, your parents, you are not responsible for ensuring that they navigate their way through life unharmed. Only they can live their life. I know that's hard to hear, especially if you can see that the person might be doing harm to themselves or to others, but it's not your journey, it's theirs. So when you're supporting someone, remember that the choices they make are theirs to make. It's a fact of life that you have no control over what someone else does or does not do. And so accepting that fact is essential if you want to ensure that you have some peace of mind, especially if you try to support someone but it just doesn't help. Speaking of, the next general piece of advice is directly for those of you listening who are parents, and then I'll get into some specific advice for everybody. So, parents, if you have kids, your responsibility is about setting them up for success. And so the piece here is that it does not mean that your role involves solving all of their problems for them. Why? Because you are making their future life 1,000 times more difficult than it needs to be. Problems are a part of life for everyone, and I know you probably want to protect them, but you make things worse if you try to resolve everything for them. Maybe you've heard of the term lawnmower parents, which describes the type of parent who tries to mow down any obstacles in the path of their children to make life easier. Problem is, if you keep on doing that, then they're going to wind up in their 30s, 40s, 50s, still living at home and without basic coping skills every time they hit a small problem in life, which they inevitably will because life is full of challenges. And I hate to break it to you, but you are not always going to be around to fight their battles for them. Or maybe you will, but do you really want to be 85 and still sorting out all the little issues that your kids have? Instead, choose to set them up for success by being a sounding board and a guide, rather than taking ownership of their problems. The same thing applies for everyone when it comes to your partners, relatives, friends, all of it. So with that said, let's now talk about some specific healthy ways that you can do all of that, starting with be there for the people that you care about. And this means that you show up in some form, either physically, like in person when it's safe to do so, by phone or video call, and to a lesser extent by text message or whatever. I'll come back to that in a moment. But when I say that you show up, as well as being there physically, it's actually about being present, mentally and emotionally, rather than it just being a one-sided type of conversation. Now, I said to a lesser extent with text message because text-based communication is no substitution for a real conversation. So if you're going to support someone, make like it's 1998 and pick up the phone to talk to them about how they're doing. Maybe just be considerate and pre-book the phone call with them so that they're prepared, because I don't know too many people who just answer their phone randomly these days like some kind of Neanderthal. My next point is ask open-ended questions. So instead of asking, is there anything I can do, which will either get you a yes or a no response, ask questions like, what can I do? Or how can I support you? These open questions invite conversation and discussion. And they offer an opportunity for you to take the be there for them bit of advice further by finding specific ways that they might need you to be there for them. Again, remembering to set and maintain healthy boundaries. My next point is listen. Sometimes people just need to be heard, so listen. That means giving them your full attention, put your phone away or turn the TV off. And that means not adding your opinion or sharing similar stories, because there's a big difference between empathizing and turning the attention back to you. And even if the person is going through something similar to what you've dealt with in the past, please remember that we are all unique and no two situations will ever be identical. So how you experience challenges will not be identical to how others do. Just listen and be a shoulder to cry on if necessary. My next point is empathy versus sympathy. Empathy is about understanding someone's feelings, whereas sympathy involves pity or sadness for the person and their plight. Sympathy can feel patronizing, and also it often involves taking on way too much of the emotional side of whatever the person is dealing with, something that goes really into unhealthy support territory. My next point is understand that the person is going through something and let them feel what they need to feel. If raw emotions come out, let them come out without intervention. I know it's very uncomfortable for some people to just sit quietly when someone is sobbing in front of them. And maybe I'm weird because it's something that I don't have a problem with. I'm fine to just sit quietly while the person experiences whatever emotions they need to experience. The thing is that tears are an excellent physical release. And if you're feeling really uncomfortable, just sit quietly and remind yourself that you are choosing to be supportive and kind by not rushing them through what is a necessary emotional moment. My next point is practice non-judgment, which is basically a nice way of saying don't be an asshole. We each have our own values and beliefs in life, and so your experience is going to be very different to mine and so on. So when you're being supportive towards another, bear this in mind and don't judge if their life choices or approaches are different to yours. The only values to factor into how you approach the situation really are just to do no harm, be kind, and give more than you take. For everything else, if the person isn't harming anyone, then just let them be. My next piece of specific advice is that it's okay not to have all the answers. You don't need to be an expert, and frankly, it's pretty unlikely that you are anyway. Learn to be okay with saying that you don't know, and instead offer to point them in the right direction, or walk side by side with them as they find the answers they need. Which leads to my next point, learn. So the other piece here is that if you don't have all the answers, you can certainly learn what the person is experiencing. You do that by asking questions, remaining open-minded, and seeking out information from relevant sources like support groups, etc. My next point is check in with the person regularly. If someone is really struggling, make a point to check in with them every few days or every week so that they know that you're there for them beyond that initial support conversation as well. There are a whole bunch of ways that you can do this, and this is my final point in this section, which is about low pressure support. So I'm going to give you a whole list of things. Now, bear in mind, obviously, that all of this is in the transcript. If you are interested, you can find that at letstalkaboutmentalhealth.com.au/episodes. So here's my list. Some low pressure things you can do include taking the person out for a coffee or tea, catching up in person or via video call, make it a low-key catch-up, watching a TV show or movie together, even if you're doing that online from separate locations, send them a whole bunch of memes that made you laugh, especially if it's around a common interest, drop over a care basket. Can I just say on this one, please don't just turn up to someone's house unannounced, because very few people will be grateful for you turning up on their doorstep with no notice, especially if they're going through something. So please be mindful of that. Other things you can do include going for a walk together every week or every few days, running some errands for them, offering to do something to give them some time or space to themselves, like if they're a parent, offer to mind the kids, if they're a fur parent, offer to mind their dog or cat, and also, probably the biggest one, when you can and when it's safe to do so, give them a hug. Because physical contact makes such a world of difference and it's soothing, and we human beings do tend to crave it quite often. Not all of us, but most of us. There are thousands of healthy things that you can do which serve to support the person and show them how much you care. And generally, when any of us are going through a tough time, we just want to know and feel that we have people who truly care about us. Because when it comes to supporting others and mental health, what it all boils down to is this. An important part of this life is about the relationships we have with the people we care about most, and sometimes they need our support. Healthy relationships are ones that are not one-sided, and so it's important to consider that if and when you're going into support mode. Give your kindness and support, but also ensure that you are setting very clear boundaries for yourself in order to maintain a healthy relationship that is independent rather than codependent. Each of us are responsible for our own lives and the choices we make. And so when you're supporting someone else, it's about ensuring that you're giving them support without absolving them of responsibility and accountability. The choice is yours, as it is with all things related to your well-being. So, what choice will you make today? Each week I like to finish up by sharing a quote about the week's topic, and I encourage you to take a few moments to really reflect on it and consider what it means to you. This week's quote is by American writer Loretta Gazzatis, and it is, "If someone listens or stretches out a hand or whispers a word of encouragement, extraordinary things begin to happen." Let me repeat that. If someone listens or stretches out a hand or whispers a word of encouragement, extraordinary things begin to happen. Alright, that's nearly it for this week. Next week, I'll be talking about self-forgiveness. I talked about forgiveness back in episode 44, and a lot of that was about your relationships with others. So much so that I thought it would be ideal to turn the focus inwards and look at forgiving yourself. It's a topic that can be quite challenging and confronting for many, especially when we start talking about the kind of hurt and pain that we carry around for years. But there is a point at which we need to let go and forgive ourselves for the things we've done or not done in the past. So next week I'll be talking about what self-forgiveness is, why it matters, and how to forgive yourself. I hope you'll join me for that episode, which will be released on Sunday the 23rd of May. And join me for Let's Talk About Mental Health TV on YouTube, with new episodes released every Wednesday, along with weekly episodes of no-nonsense advice for living every Saturday on my other YouTube channel. You can find links as well as past episodes at letstalkaboutmentalhealth.com.au, and while you're there, join the mailing list for exclusive updates and my weekly newsletter. You can also find the website links in the description of this episode on whatever podcast service you're currently using. You can also find Let's Talk About Mental Health on Instagram, Pinterest, and Facebook at LTA Mental Health, where I post extra content daily. Thank you very much for joining me today. Look after yourself and make a conscious effort to share positivity and kindness out into the world, because you get back what you put out. Take care and talk to you next time.